So we have the saying, it's so quiet you can hear a pin drop. You compare the quiet to a noise. Now you have a better picture of how quiet it was. This is how important contrast is.
Hello, and welcome to You Are A Storyteller. In this episode, Brian and Jesse discuss why contrast is so crucial in telling a clear story. When you tell stories with intention, there's no need for confusing characters or overcomplicated plot twists. Instead, simple, straightforward contrast allows your audience to invest in and learn from your story. This program is produced in Seattle, Washington by Belief Agency.
There's a couple of things that might seem kind of insignificant. You know, you get older and you're like, God, I didn't know how profound that was. It was such a small thing. And then later on you realize like, wow, that really is, that's the whole game. Like if somebody says like, you know, love is the whole point or something. And you're like, yeah. And then later on you think about it, you're like, you know, whatever, you're 60, you're finally getting old enough and you're like,
right.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize how profound that was.
Yeah.
There's some of those things that are like that for story that you taught me that I always come back to, and they seem so small and insignificant, but man, once you start looking, first thing is you got to learn how to see it, which is huge.
That is
right.
Which is massive. It's a step that people want to skip, by the way.
Right.
Just tell me how to do it. Just tell me how to do it. Right.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
For instance, I have a friend coming over later on this week, and I'm just going to be showing some clips because I was like, once you see this, it'll help you. Like you've got to see it in action, and then so once you can start to see it on like the screen or in text form, then all of a sudden you can see it over dinner. Then all of a sudden you can go from seeing to applying.
Right.
Anyways, one of those concepts is contrast, and it sounds like a really simple thing. And so on this week's episode, though, hang with us because once you understand the importance of contrast and why stories need them, it will immediately make your writing or your storytelling or your filming better. Can we start with this thing you told me? This was years ago. You talked about silhouettes, and you were talking about it from the standpoint of animation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain why silhouettes were so important?
Yeah, and it's funny because I got accused of you really like silhouettes, you know, and I think people thought it was a taste thing. You know, this person thought it was a taste thing, but it wasn't taste. Silhouettes in animation, it's not just animation though. Any kind of illustration or where you're communicating visually like that. When you have a character like. I would have a hard time when I was working with comic book artists. Sometimes they would have a character punching and they would do it like this, right? Like, and I go, if you move that arm out, right?
And by this, just so everybody who's listening, you have your fist right in the middle of the frame.
Camera, right? So
yeah.
But if you bend the arm out so that you can see the shape of the arm, you can see the fist. It creates a clearer image. It's not muddy. It communicates better. It just, it's an old principle and animators know it and good illustrators know it. It really helps communicate, and that's your job. I don't know why people forget that's the job. But it is. And so
real quick. Okay. Don't miss what Brian just said. He just said the job is communicating. If you, that's like a step one principle. Your job is not to wow people. Your job is not to, shock people. First and foremost, your job is to communicate, right? And something like contrast is going to help you do that. I don't know. That's just such a great call out. I didn't want anybody to miss that.
Sure. I think that, silhouettes, and I take pictures and I try to get silhouettes. Because I'm trying to, it's in some ways, it allows you to eliminate everything else and still communicate. Mm-hmm. And I'm always trying to get to that place of simplicity where I can eliminate everything but X. I can eliminate everything but Y. Because if you only have that one thing, that one idea, you're going to communicate it much more clearly. If you have one idea, but kind of another one and half of another one, now it's all muddy and nobody knows what you're saying.
Yeah. So you showed me this thing, Brian. What was the thing called? You showed me, it was all the silhouettes of the Disney characters. And so you were like, look at the silhouettes. And you're like, well, who's that? And I was like, well, that's Goofy.
Yeah.
You can't see it. It's just an outline of it's a shape. And I'm like, that's Goofy. That's Minnie. that's Mickey, that's Donald. And you're like, see how you can identify them purely from their silhouette? What is there a name for that? Or was that just a common?
It's pretty common. I'm sure. I mean, they talk about it in terms of silhouettes. I don't know if there's another name for that, but character designers often use it. Like they know their character has to be identifiable by that silhouette. So they'll think in those terms. Yeah, most good illustrators will have some idea of that. Sometimes it might be intuitive, but most good illustrators have some idea of a silhouette and how strong it is.
Well, so I think one of the things you were talking about then too is you were like, people see through contrast.
Yes.
They see through contrast. If you don't create enough contrast, it's impossible for people to see it.
Yeah.
So like if I put all the Avengers in silhouette and you can't tell the difference between the Hulk and Captain America, I didn't do a good job.
Right.
There's a lot of times I'll be watching a movie and I'll turn to Kate or whoever I'm watching with and I'll be like, wait, so is that his girlfriend or is that his wife?
Yeah.
I can't tell the difference between the characters.
Right.
Or there's this one actress specifically where I'm like, there's another actress who's just like her. And I'm always like, was she the one that was in that? Or was that? I couldn't differentiate. It's very easy to differentiate David from Goliath.
Right.
It's very hard to differentiate if you're like, it's David and David. Oh, you didn't notice that other David had a mole on his pinky? It's like, no, nobody noticed. You have to create contrast if you want people to see what you're either talking about or looking at. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, like a penny only looks small next to $1.
Right.
But if you put a penny next to a pin, like the tip of a pin, the penny would look big. Without that contrast, it's impossible for people to see. And people don't understand that tool is biologically built into us. So if you're not creating stories that leverage contrast, you're not communicating as clearly as you can.
Yeah. There's a book called How Pictures Work.
Yeah, it's great. Yep.
Yeah, it's a really great book by Molly Bang. It's a really great book. I don't know how many copies of this book I've sold by talking about it.
Yeah.
But it's a really great book. It's one of those things that looks simple, but it's a pretty complicated, well thought out book. She's the first person when I read her book and she said contrast is how we see.
That's so good.
I was like, I knew that from writing and all of that, but I never put it like that. It was just so simple. Again, precise, right? It's simple.
Yep.
And that's true. Contrast is how we see. So, and she was talking about, drawings, but it's true in general.
Of course. Yep. And shout out to her for people have to understand how hard it is. The fact she could crystallize that into a sentence like that, understand how difficult that is to do.
Yeah.
And she deserves to sell as many books as possible. When you can crystallize something like that, understand how hard that was. It's amazing. Because I bought the book when you told me to buy it and I'm reading it and I'm like, this is it feels like nothing.
Yeah.
It's so brilliant. It's deceptively clear, which is perfect.
Yep.
Right? You could give it to anybody and they would get it. But at the same time, the more you think about it, you're like, wow, talk about threading the needle on a piece of content.
And it's deep. It doesn't go away. You read it and it doesn't go away. It's always in there.
Yeah. So play it out, right? It's like you go like, okay, well, I mean, literally, let's think about the big, okay, you have Satan, you have Jesus, you have Darth Vader. Like, I'm just saying, like, think about these pairings. You have yin and yang, right?
Right.
Contrast. It's like Hitchcock would do this, where like all the cars would be white and then the bad guy's car would be black. Why? Right. Because he knew you had to be able to watch that car go through traffic. Yep. These are little things that sound like little things, but boy, when directors or writers or producers, whoever, when they don't understand this, all of a sudden you're going like, wait, is that their car? Was that their car? Did they turn left or right? Does anybody know what's going on?
Yeah. It's funny because there are times, I'll be watching a film. When I'm watching a film, of course, I'm watching story and all of that. But the other thing I'm watching is how my eye is directed. Let's say if there's a crowd scene on the street and our character is walking down the street and I go, how do I know to look at that person versus all the other people? Yeah. And sometimes the way that people do it is contrast. So sometimes it's clothing choices, like you said,
Yep.
like maybe it's a lighter suit and everybody else is in darker stuff, but this guy has a white t-shirt or whatever. Some of it's compositional, right? You're more likely to look here than there. And some of it is let's say you have everybody walking either right to left past camera or
Yep.
away from camera, but our guy's coming towards camera. It's not
Think
anything.
of the opening of Road to Perdition. The entire crowd, he's going to sell newspapers. The entire crowd is walking from left to right, and he's coming into the crowd right to left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Once you see it, you'll know, oh, got it. Like those, what it's again, trying to learn how to see.
Yeah.
Even if you just go watch the first 30 seconds of that movie, you'll go, got it. That's what he was trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do it right, like that's the kind of thing where you might also be saying, this is a person who goes against the crowd. This is a
Yep.
You know, like there are other reasons that you might do it, but one of the reasons is to make it clear this is who you're supposed to be paying attention to. And you do that through contrast. Yeah, it's how do you know when somebody's succeeded? Usually by seeing someone fail. Or seeing that person fail more than one. You know, there's a thing I show from the movie Kramer versus Kramer when I talk about visual storytelling. And I show 2 of the scenes, but there's actually 3. And I should be showing the 3rd one, but anyway. But so in that movie, by the way, somebody saw the movie. They hadn't seen it, and they saw it, and they were like, it was online, and they were like, I saw that movie finally. What a terrible movie. It's like, oh, you don't know what you're looking at. Like it, you might not.
Wow,
like
they said that about Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah, it's like you might not like it, but you literally you don't know what you're looking at because it's so well crafted that they couldn't see it. It was invisible to them. There's some beautiful work in there in terms of like gorgeous. So in that movie, Dustin Hoffman plays a guy whose wife, played by Meryl Streep, has left him at the beginning of the movie, and she leaves him with their young son, who's I guess about 5 years old. And Dustin Hoffman's character doesn't spend any time with his son, doesn't know how to deal with his son. He like mostly works, and his wife stayed home and took care of the kid. So now he's like, he finds himself having to do that. And so this is the first day where he wakes up in the morning and his son has to get ready for school and everything. And it's like, oh yeah. And he doesn't even know the mom has left the son. So he's got to tell, oh, the mommy went away for a little while, whatever. Anyway, so he's trying to make breakfast for his son, and it's awful the way he can't do it. He can't do it at all. Like you see him trying to make French toast, and he's terrible at it. Everything goes wrong. It's awful. Later on in the movie, they have a routine worked out. So he's not making breakfast the way his wife would have done it, but they have a routine with the cereal and the thing, and it's very calm, and it's actually very nice. It's very visual.
Yep.
And it tells you where they are in their relationship. But the very last time, at the end of the movie, it's gone. You're all the way at the. Here's another thing, and this is also contrast. In most stories, in many stories anyway, a story is circular, right? It starts someplace. The character goes on this journey. You come back around to the beginning, but this time something's different.
Mm-hmm.
You're back around to the beginning, and this time it's different because of what happened in the middle, right? So you go back to the
David Lean's a great guy for people to watch if they want to see it done really well.
Yeah. So you go back to him making breakfast for his son, making French toast, and this time it's perfect.
Yeah.
And there's no stress about it. Like it's perfect. And you see the journey through this making of breakfast. And you're comparing the first time you saw it to the last time you saw it. And you're comparing, so you're seeing the contrast. And sometimes that stuff is noticed by an audience, and sometimes it's just felt by an audience.
Yeah.
Right? So much has happened, they may not recall all the details, but they feel it. But that contrast is what that's communication, right? What I find so often is that people don't understand that in order to show me this person is good at what they do, you need to either show me somebody bad at what that thing or show me them getting better at it. They don't understand that, and they don't do it. And so they miss an opportunity to have me respond to the contrast, to go, oh, wow, look how much better she is at that than she was before, or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, it's unbelievably important. That's why you see, again, that's why you have the tortoise and the hare, right? Because that's contrast.
That's right.
Right.
Yep. It'll work forever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one's fast, one's slow. I get it. Right. You're not trying to be clever. You're trying to communicate.
That's why you got Mary Poppins and Mr. Banks. That's why you got, I don't know, Roger Rabbit and Eddie. That's why you got, I don't like whatever, Tom and Jerry, like add them up.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one of the cool things in Jaws, among many cool things in Jaws, is that the sheriff is scared of the water, doesn't want to be on this boat. And he's on this boat with two seasoned sailors who deal with sharks, and they're used to it. And so that contrast heightens his fear. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Like these guys are so confident. I can't, you get a different sense of his fear because these other guys are so confident and so comfortable with
it's great
sharks or, being out on the ocean. He doesn't like any of those things. And that contrast makes things come alive in a different way. If you don't have that contrast, it's not the same thing.
God. And then the magic is when you have that contrast and then you bring them together.
Yeah.
Right. Like that scene where everybody's showing their scars, where you have these three distinct characters. Right. And it's like, whatever, she broke my heart, whatever, like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's, you can tell the difference. Like if you're struggling right now with your characters and people are reading it and they're confused, one of the things you should be looking at is there enough contrast?
Yeah.
If people are asking when they read your script and they go like, wait, so was the mom the one that killed him or the aunt? I wasn't clear. It's like, okay, there's something going on there. There's not enough contrast. Nobody ever said, was it David or Goliath that got killed? It's like everybody knows it was Goliath. Like,
who won the race? The hare?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. There's a movie, Serpico, with Al Pacino, made in the 70s. And Serpico, it's based on a real guy. And Serpico was a good cop in a bad police precinct. Everybody was on the take, taking drug money and stuff. And he wouldn't do it because he thought, well, I'm a cop. That's not what I'm supposed to do. One of the things that makes him appear clearly heroic is that he's by himself, that he's contrasted against these people. A lot of them are like, look, what's the big deal? Just take the money. Just take it and shut up. That's what we all do. Like some of them are bad guys and some of them are just regular dudes who are like, it's just easier to take the money. Why don't you just take it?
Yep.
Take it and shut up. Right. But he looks like a saint because of the comparison, because you're comparing him to that's again, that's one of those things you don't see people do. They will just have the good cop or have the bad cop without giving you any contrast.
Oh man. And in that scene, Lament, he sets up that scene. It's in a park and they're all standing next to one lone tree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you look at all the other cops, they're in like, they're wearing ties and stuff. And Serpico's wearing like this badass, like black leather jacket.
Right, yeah.
He looks like the tough guy or the guy that would be on the take. And he's not.
Right.
He's the opposite of everyone else around him the entire movie.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things like, God, you talk about Sidney Lumet, like watch how if you haven't seen the movie, at least I'm running it in my head. And I think that's like, watch it again and look at how he sets that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely brilliant. Also look at how he stages. Okay. So I think I remember he's centering up Serpico and he's got everybody else in a circle. Also look at how he even stages that.
Yeah.
Watch how he builds contrast in. It's really, really smart because they're negotiating in that scene where they're like, hey man, we'll give you the money. You can just give it to charity. And like, they're trying to, and you just see he doesn't bend, right? He doesn't ever bend.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing about Bugs Bunny. Speaking of contrast. So Bugs Bunny has a lot of people, they had a rule about Bugs Bunny, right? So that Bugs Bunny it didn't start off this way. He was just a crazy, wacky rabbit who did all kinds of crazy things. But eventually they figured out he works best if he's minding his own business and somebody is bothering him, right? So he doesn't bother anybody until it's more of a heroic move, right? Like, I don't bother anybody. But then they come and mess with him, and then, all bets are off. But what's interesting about Bugs Bunny is he's got two sort of people he's always often pitted against. Elmer Fudd, right? If you know Bugs Bunny, not as many people know Bugs Bunny as used to, but for those of you who do, Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam. And if you watch the difference in how Bugs Bunny is when he's with those two people, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So Elmer Fudd is a very slow character. So he's really, I don't know, maybe he's that. Maybe we should, he's a very slow character. And so Bugs Bunny's always very quick around him, very fast talking, very quick. Very right.
Duck season, rabbit season.
Yeah. But when he's with Yosemite Sam is a very fast character. So Bugs Bunny slows down.
God, that's so smart. I never noticed that. That's fantastic. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
He's building in Chuck Jones or whoever. They're building the contrast in.
Yeah.
That's super smart.
Isn't it smart?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chuck Jones was so next level. Like even when you think about Feed the Kitty, which if you haven't seen, also, by the way, all of these, I watch them almost every night with Scout. I watch the old Looney Tunes and my little girl, and they're all on HBO Go or Max or whatever it's called. There's an entire tab. If you haven't seen them, watch Feed the Kitty. You got this big ravenous dog and this tiny little kitty. Contrast.
Yep.
That stuff right there with Yosemite Sam and Elmer, I never considered the fact that they're so similar. Two gun-toting, right, like people. And the way that he did that and made that work was he differentiated them,
right,
by slowing him down and speeding him up, speeding him down, slowing him up.
Yeah.
And you go, God, that's so smart. And the difference when you look at Chuck Jones's work versus all the other directors, you can't even really explain how much better he was at his job.
Yeah.
Same resources.
I know.
Right. But you'll watch one and be like, that didn't hold up. Sure enough, Chuck didn't do it. And then you watch one and be like, my God, that was tight. And it was Chuck. And he always thought of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Brilliant. All I have to say, though, I think that any Bugs Bunny that had Yosemite Sam was probably directed by Friz Freeling.
Yeah.
But because Yosemite Sam was a Friz Freeling like character.
But the Friz Freeling stuff doesn't. And nothing to take away from him. The guy, it's gags.
It's not as good as Chuck Jones. Nobody is.
No. He just sets up these gags and he breaks the rules all the time. So he'll be like, he'll set up a world, and all the way halfway through the second act, all of a sudden now he'll like almost pull a trick that you would see in the Roadrunner.
Yeah.
So like in Roadrunner, there's things like, he always does the opposite. So if he jumps on it and the boulder's supposed to go up and land on the Roadrunner, he jumps on it and the boulder goes straight up and straight down or whatever. Right. It always does contrast. Friz will do that in like a Yosemite Sam, having not set up that world at all, and I'll be going, what do you can't pull that kind of a gag off because you didn't set it up.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Chuck doesn't do that.
No.
It's amazing. Again, all these little things, even from a standpoint of a silhouette. Could you pull out Elmer's silhouette versus Yosemite's? You bet you could. Could you pull out Tweety Bird's versus Sylvester's? You bet you could.
Yep.
But that's super smart.
The other thing too, I'm thinking about clones and clone characters. And for people who don't know, now here's the problem with the word clones is that people get very literal. So if I say clones, because the clones aren't always exactly identical in terms of story. They're not exactly like but that's the way clones are. And then people get hung up on it. The problem is when anybody else has talked about it, they have called them reflection characters or mirror characters. And so all the terms are like that. So no one's come up with a term that works. So just understand you're bending the definition just a little bit here to make it fit. And so, but basically a clone character is a character you measure your main character against. Right. So you notice that Elmer's slow because Bugs Bunny's fast, right? Those are clones, right? The Three Little Pigs are the best.
The first two pigs are clones.
The first two pigs are clones, right? It's really about the last pig who built the house
Yeah.
of bricks. But you have to see the failure of the first two pigs to understand the success of the last pig.
Yep.
Right? So those are, the clone characters in the Wizard of Oz, right? If the armature, the point of the Wizard of Oz is you may already have what you're looking for, then those other characters already have the things that they're looking for, that they're going to ask the wizard for. So the Scarecrow is always coming up with plans. The Tin Man is always crying and emotional, and the Lion is always brave, and they have to do that all the way through. And that's a way of reinforcing the idea. That's how clones are often used. So people tend to think of it as it would be in a simple story that you would have a clone, because it seems simple and almost fairy tale like, or what? Oh, Three Little Pigs, I get it. Oh, Wizard of Oz. But one of the best uses of clone characters I've seen is in the Shawshank Redemption. In the Shawshank Redemption, you have Brooks, who is the oldest sort of inmate, and in the prison, in Shawshank prison, and Brooks finally gets out after years of being in prison. And Brooks has this, he lives in this little apartment that he rents, and he has this job at a grocery store where he like bags groceries, and he hates it. It's awful. He hates everything. Also, the world has changed. Like when he went in, there were hardly any cars on the street. Like cars existed, but nobody had a car. And, the world was too fast and for him now, and everything, nothing was working for him. And so there's this great narration, and I don't remember exactly the words, but paraphrasing. But basically, he says, he gets all dressed up. You see him getting dressed up, putting on a tie and everything. And he says, is he not comfortable here? And he says,
because he wrote the letter to Red.
Yeah.
And he's reading it. Yeah.
Yes. And so it's like, I'm not comfortable here. I've decided to leave. I doubt that they'll kick up any fuss for an old man like me.
Yep. An old con like me. That's right.
Yeah. Right. And then he carves in a beam. Brooks was here. And he hangs himself, commits suicide.
Yeah.
Right?
All the while, Darbon is shooting him through bars.
And it's
so well constructed, it's stupid.
Yeah, Darbon is very good. So
yeah.
Yeah. And so that happens. Now, Red, people think that Andy Dufresne's the main character. I would argue that it was Red.
Yep.
And not Andy. Because Red is really the character of change.
Yeah, he's the one that changes. Yeah.
Right. Andy stays the same. Right.
Yep.
So anyway, so Red gets out. Finally gets out, gets paroled. You see, he's a clone character because he goes through exactly the same experience. He's living in the same place, the same apartment that Brooks was in. He has the same job.
They both, I think, even ask, "Can I use the bathroom?"
Yes.
They're doing match shots.
Yeah.
That's how surgical Darbon is with this.
Yeah. And Red's narration ends up being exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
I've decided to leave. I doubt they'll kick up any fuss for, an old con like me or an old man like whatever it says. He carves next to Brooks was here. So was Red. And he leaves. He doesn't hang himself. Well, the armature, the point of that movie, that story is get busy living or get busy dying, right? The contrast is you see Brooks get busy dying. You see Red get busy living. Those are your two choices. It's so good.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It is.
It's life. Like you see these shots of Brooks almost getting hit by a car because he's not paying attention to the movies. And all of a sudden, then you see Red like on the bus, and he's like, I can hardly sit still. Yeah. It's like you got one denying technology of the other one embracing the tech. Like it's just it's so well done and so well thought out.
Yeah.
That I think a lot of people, though, if they saw that on paper, would say too similar.
Yes.
Why are they in the same apartment? Don't you think it'd be better if maybe we made it more like, here's the classic. Can you take that externalization of what you're doing and make it like an internal thing? Like maybe there's an angst about the new apartment. You're like, no. It's a visual medium. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Shooting through those bars. Don't you think that's a little too on the nose or whatever? You're like, no, people aren't going to know. It will be invisible ink to your book. Right. But you know what I'm saying? I think that if you saw that, number one, it 100% works. Everybody knows that because there's a lot of people listening right now going, shit, I didn't even notice that. Right. And even for the people that could notice it, did it bother you? I don't know why it would.
Right.
So I'm just saying, if you saw that on paper, I could see people thinking it was too obvious.
Right.
Or it was too well done, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He did the braver thing. Darabont did the braver thing and he went right at it.
Well, it's braver to communicate clearly.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
Because if you mumble, you can always be like, I didn't mean that.
Right.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. But
That's good.
just go do it. Communicate. What are you trying to hide? Right.
Yeah.
Another really good example of contrast and clone characters is Marlon and Dory in Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
Right. Because Marlon is fearful, unbelievably fearful. And he's plagued by the memory of his wife's death and the death of his other kids who aren't Nemo. Dory is happy, go lucky, not scared of anything, but also has no memory.
Yeah.
She's not plagued by memory. She can't remember anything. Like, that's unbelievable contrast.
Yeah. It's so smart.
It's really smart.
Like when you start seeing it, you go like, okay, you want to know why those characters aren't working? Because there's not enough contrast. Take the guy with the memory that's haunted by memories and pair him with a person that has no memories.
Yeah.
Right? It's peanut butter and jelly. I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you're right. Most of the time when you tell people to do that, most people reject it. That's so easy. That's too simple. I don't know why, but we've been sold a bill of goods about simplicity.
Yeah.
And it can't be good. It's simple. It has to be complicated. It has to be overly complicated. In fact, it has to be, it's almost a puzzle that you have to figure out, and you can pat yourself on the back because you figured out this crazy puzzle. Well, if you listen to this, then the guy really meant that. And did you read the book too? And did you, if you play the video game or if you read all the comics, then you get like, I'm just watching this thing right now. Can you just tell me a story, please? It becomes, and the other thing, this is the thing that drives me crazy about it, actually. When you talk about how I think people aren't communicating because they're like, well, you have to see all of these movies, or, whatever it is. What people don't understand, they think it's cool, but it's just a way to get you to buy more things. It's not a creative decision. It's a marketing decision not to communicate with you and to go, we hit it over here, we hit it over there. And if you do this, and if you get the thing with the special features, you'll get that. Like it's all about just selling you more stuff. And it makes worse stories because.
But what they don't understand is the people that do it simplistically, they will sell okay, how much money did Wizard of Oz make this year?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
How much money did E.T. make this year?
Yeah.
Right? Pick another, go find the most popular family movie from 5 years ago and benchmark that against whatever the Wizard of Oz and E.T. Like, so the funny thing is they think, it's like this happens all the time in marketing agencies, stuff like that, where they try to hold, control all your data and your customers and all that, because they're like, then they won't be able to leave. What would be a better way to do it? Do such a good job that they don't want to leave. Like, what the hell are you talking about? It's easier, like you said, it's so easy to be confusing and to go, well, if you haven't read the fan fiction version of that comic book or whatever, if you would have known that, you were smart. It's like, no, you're lazy.
Right.
Right? Because imagine, again, all these things, benchmark all of these ideas against a conversation you just had with a friend. You're like, I went out to lunch with Brian. The whole time he was talking about something, I had no idea what he was talking about. And then he said, "Oh, you should buy this book so that you know what I'm talking about." And it's like, I'm not going to do. It's like we're sitting here having coffee, and he's saying I have to buy a book before I can understand what he's saying. Like, what? Who does that? It's like, yeah, it's not a good way to do that.
Yeah. So contrast. It's this. It's funny. One of the ways, when I was young, that I sort of learned how to write characters. I learned it from Stan Lee, because in the old days they used to have in radio. This seems to have gone away, and it's actually, I think, poor writing that it's gone away. And in radio they would say, because they only had the voices, they didn't have faces, they only had the voices. So the voices were often very distinct. Right. I'm the old man and I talk like this, right? Whatever it is, right? They're very distinct and almost cartoonish, because you had to be able to tell one person from another on the radio without any faces. And the other thing is, you should be able to tell who's talking when you read the script without seeing the name of that character, because they have their own way of talking. They have their own speech pattern. They have their own vocabulary. They speak differently. And where I first sort of saw that in a way that I could recognize it was the Fantastic Four. So I would read the Fantastic Four, and Mr. Fantastic is the brainiac. He's the smart guy. He's the scientist, and that's the way he talks. The Thing, Ben Grimm, is more of a blue collar kind of a character, and that's the way he talks. And they're very different characters. And you could tell who was talking if you didn't, just by their voices on the page. There's no sound to their voices, right? But they sound different. There's a contrast. You got, and in fact, they are a contrast in that one guy's made out of rocks and the other guy's basically made out of rubber, can stretch. Like, they are a contrast that way. And, again, one's well-spoken, the other one's not as well-spoken. There are all kinds of contrasts, and it really makes those characters work. And in fact, in the original Star Trek, in the pilot, William Shatner's not in the pilot. So what's interesting is Spock's not quite right in the pilot. And one of the things that Leonard Nimoy said is that when Shatner was cast, it allowed him to find Spock, because it was in contrast to the way William Shatner was, right? So
yeah,
like he could solidify that character better in figuring him out, because he had William Shatner to work against.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, if he's this guy, then I need to be that guy.
Yeah, if he's Bert, then I got to be Ernie.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if he's more emotional and let's just go down to the planet, and then you got a Spock who's like, well, hold on, logically speaking. Yeah. Right? It makes sense. It just works.
Yeah.
And now the characters are defined, which means the audience can understand and you can communicate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that, like, if characters are really well, like say on a situation comedy or something, like Frasier.
Yeah.
When a character is really well defined, you can get a laugh from an audience just by having that character do something that is so much like them.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my God, that's exactly what Frasier would do. Right?
Yep. Yeah. Columbo's the same way, right?
Yeah.
You take this guy, this bumbling idiot with the old jacket his wife got given for free or found or whatever, and his old car, and what do? All the people he goes after is, this person's the CEO of this, and this is the biggest conductor in the world. And you pair them with people that think they're way smarter than him and all that. Yeah. And like, all of a sudden it's so well defined. It's like, man, just sit back. It's going to be amazing. Yeah.
His characters are defined, and he does always contrast the people, right? He's a rumpled guy. Like you say, he got this old raincoat. They're always wealthy people on Columbo that have killed somebody. They're always, wine experts or art dealers or
writers. There's actually quite a few episodes about writers.
Yeah, that's true. Right? But people of high status, and really lots of money. Movie stars. There's one with a movie star, right? So it's almost like there's an argument visually. right?
That's interesting.
There's a visual argument, right? Because Columbo doesn't belong in the spaces he finds himself in. Fancy stuff, right? Like in fact,
where does he do his meetings? He's always at the hot dog place,
right? Yeah, he always goes to a cafe and has chili. Always has the chili.
Right? Yeah.
How's the chili? He's just a regular dude. Maybe a little more regular than most people, and that comparison creates a kind of that conflict is always it's always there in the visuals because you have something to compare to.
Well, look at Mary and Rhoda.
The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Mary and Rhoda are very different characters. And the other character, the woman in that show, Phyllis, is different still in a different way. And each character helps define the other character.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Each character helps define the other character. That's great.
So it's like, oh, that person is always loud and blah, blah, blah. And she's always quiet and blah, blah, blah. So, and it's like somebody quiet all by themselves isn't exactly quiet. This is how important contrast is. So we have the saying, right? It's so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Why is the pin drop important? Why not just say it was so quiet? Well, there's nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
But if you go, it's so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. You compare the quiet to a noise. Now you have a better picture of how quiet it was.
It's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. Right. There's that sound designer who was talking about a quiet battlefield. I've told you this before.
Yep. Yeah.
And so the director wanted the battlefield, like it was after the battle, and he wanted nothing but quiet. He wanted it to be silent. And the sound designer had put in a fly.
Was that Kubrick? Was that Paths of Glory?
It might have been Paths of Glory. It might have been Kubrick. But the sound designer had put in the sound of a fly. And the director said, wait, I said I wanted it to be silent. I wanted it to be quiet. And the sound designer's like, yes, it's so quiet, you can hear a fly.
So smart.
Yeah.
Like that, whoever said that, and we can find that. You know how smart that is?
Yeah.
Like it's fantastic. What a great way to solve that problem. Because if it was nothing, it wouldn't matter. But man, just hearing that fly. Also, the fly reinforces depth. It's just that is such an elegant solution. It's like I said, when you see people running at the top of their game, it's like ballet, where you're like everything is effortless and it's all working. That sound designer, because now what people don't understand is now it's just nonstop explosion, so things don't matter.
Right.
Watch for how a good sound designer rests.
Yep.
Watch how, there'll be like a big explosive scene or whatever, and then watch them as fast as possible. They're going to get to quiet.
Yeah.
Because they know they got to cleanse the palate. Right.
Yeah.
And the people that don't know that, it's just, whatever, 90 minutes of explosions, nothing matters.
Right. And people don't understand is that the loud makes the quiet, and the quiet makes the loud louder. Yep. Right. So people, it's a nonstop roller coaster. Well, that's you get burned out on a nonstop roller coaster.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And all they can do is try to up it and up it and up it and up it and up it. Right. It becomes kind of a Cold War of trying to keep your attention. Right. Because, well, you've already seen 5 explosions, so let's go 8. You've already seen the White House explode, so let's blow up a planet. They keep upping it. Right. Because they don't know. It's like, you know what you could do? You could slow down. You could slow down. You could have nothing happen that's big for a while and watch how much. So, people need to rest. Let them rest. Give them a break. They'll appreciate that quiet moment, but you have to trust it. What it is it's somebody on a date who's afraid their date is going to lose interest, so they keep talking. It smells like desperation. It does exactly the opposite of what you want it to do. Right.
Oh, that's really good.
And so
that's survival information right there.
Right. So anyway, and then I moved to Seattle because then, it's like, okay, you know what? Never mind. Let's call it I don't think this is going to, you know what I mean? But it smells like desperation. So if somebody is throwing action at you all the time, that's desperation. they don't trust that they can get you with the quiet moments.
Yep, that's right.
But if you look at some of the best movies that you think of as action, like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Aliens, there's some quiet T2. There's some quiet moments.
Yeah.
And there's some of the best moments, actually. Die Hard. Yeah. You know, there's that scene in Die Hard where Bruce Willis has glass in his feet, and he's in a bathroom, and he's picking the glass out of his feet, and he's talking to that cop on the ground.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And he's like, I must have told my wife this. I never told her I was sorry, and all that stuff. That quiet that makes the whole movie work. Those scenes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And he's like, "What took you out of the game? You flat-footed?" And he was like, "No, I shot a kid."
Yeah.
Right. And they're having this whole conversation while he's pulling glass out of his feet. It's so well done. It's stupid.
Yeah. But it's not. It doesn't have to be action all the time. And actually, one of my very favorite things in that movie, I think it's a lot of people's favorite thing in that movie, is when Alan Rickman runs into Bruce Willis.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah,
it's so good.
No. You're one of them. You're one of them.
Yeah. Don't give me. That is so great. And it's not the action,
Yeah.
The action comes, it's coming. Don't worry. But it's those quiet, people don't understand how much that they respond to the quiet moments, because often in their memory, it's the big things. Like, after I hadn't seen Aliens for a while, I remember this was several years ago. So I'm going to watch Aliens. It's been a while. And I forgot just how much quiet time there is in Aliens. There's a lot of quiet time. A lot. Like a lot more than you remember. Like you watch it just to see how much quiet time there is. There's plenty of it.
Oh, sure.
And it makes the action work better.
Oh, dude, it's that scene in Jaws where Brody's talking to having breakfast.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean it's at the with the
dinner table.
Yeah. When he's at the dinner
There's
table.
these little things that it makes it matter.
Yeah.
Right.
That scene, I haven't seen a scene like that for a long time. If you don't know the scene we're talking about, there's a scene in Jaws where the sheriff is it's this silent scene where his son and he are sort of imitating each other. And it's a bond it's a really sweet scene. And the mom is kind of looking at it. And it's a very, very sweet scene. Most people don't take the time to do that. It humanized everything. It grounded everything. It made getting this shark matter in a different way. Like, I've got to protect my family. I've got a thing to do here. There's just something really amazing about it. And I can't tell you the last time I saw something like that in an action movie, in quotes. There's
that scene in Jojo Rabbit where they're by the stairs and the way they position the shot, his head is here and the shoes are next to him, which become important later on. Yeah. And they're just having this conversation between him and his mom.
Yeah.
It's a quiet scene.
Yeah.
But it's setting up it's very elegant. It's an elegant way to do it.
Yeah. And that, again, the quiet moments make the action better. That contrast changes how you view the action or the excitement or the suspense or whatever.
Okay, let's take this out of story and put it back to real life.
Okay.
Because again, everything that you always are talking about can be observed in nature. I remember Heather, one of our partners, right? She said, she's like, when quarantine first hit, she's like, "Oh God, Jesse, you're going to love this. You're going to be up in your office, surrounded by your books." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to just be able to read and whatever." And it was great for about a month. And I was like, well, hold on a second. How many people listening right now took those times where you can go grab a beer with a friend for granted, and now you can see that because of the contrast of silence that we've been in?
Right.
How many people, right? Like the feeling, and it's one of those things. It's like that episode of Mary where the heart attack, right? Right. Where it's like, how many of us, because of the contrast of not being able to hug your grandma or see your nephews and nieces or your friends? When's the last time you and I haven't been in the same? I mean, like, when's the last time where you can even watch a movie?
Yeah.
Right. It's like the contrast is what's going to make it so awesome. I don't even know what the hell to watch. Right. But it's going to be awesome.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
The contrast.
And so it's just,
huge.
again, it works in real life in the same way.
That's why it works in stories. That's the thing that people don't understand.
That's right.
Stories work the way they work because life works that way too.
That's right.
All the principles are based on life, you know, and you don't think we use comparisons and clone characters and contrast in life? Please.
Oh,
you don't notice
crazy.
when somebody has a nicer car than you?
Oh, yeah.
Better education?
Yeah. The marketing term is selling by association. The amount of times people are like, well, you got to understand. I mean, you know, they work at Google. So, I mean, that's saying it's like you're constantly doing that. Well, you know, he does drive a BMW. You can't be doing all things wrong or whatever. It's like we use all these different characters, right? Or, you know, your grandpa used to do that and he wasn't a good guy and you don't want to end up like him. He's a clone character. You know, grandpa would, you know, it's fun to, you know, imagine. This is a hypothetical. My grandpa's a good guy. But imagine all of a sudden you're doing something and you're going through a rough patch and your mom says, you know, watching the way you're handling this in your family is so encouraging because the way my dad would have handled it is he would have gone out drinking and that's what led to this downfall. And all of a sudden she's building contrast in and you're like, the contrast of grandpa being an alcoholic helps you see where you're at.
Or often you might say, oh, my parent was this way. That's exactly who I don't want to be.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
And so you're constantly contrasting. You go, okay, what would my dad have done? Okay. I'm going to do the opposite of what that guy would have done. If that's the way, you know, or you might fall short. You might think that your dad was he never would have done this, you know? And
yep, that's right.
You know, I'm falling short. Like if you have a role model and you feel like you're falling short, right? Like you're comparing. So there that contrast that's just built into us. We just do that.
Yep.
This is bigger than that. Their house is bigger than mine.
R2D2 looks different than C3PO.
Yeah.
All of that stuff's important.
Yeah. So, you know, we'll that's just what we do. You know, it's funny when you meet somebody at a certain age, let's say you meet them in their 70s. Well, that's who they are. Right. Right. But if you knew them from the time they were 30, right?
Yeah.
You're going, man, he's really aged, right? Because you have a comparison, right?
That's
right. Or wow, he's hardly aged, whatever it is. But it's the contrast that helps you see the age or whatever. So it's just something we do. It's just what we do. And so you can utilize it and use it in stories. How many people would understand that there's a link in construction between the Three Little Pigs and the Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah.
Right. But you understand the success of the last pig because of the failure of the first two. And you understand the success of Morgan Freeman's character of Red because of the failure of Brooks.
You have to see that. If you don't see that, how could they know what success looks like? It's okay. Let's take it to commercials. That's why I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. Contrast. Like it's like once you start see again, step one is you have to understand the concept. Step two is you got to learn how to see it. Step three, then you can start to actually master it and figure out how to apply it. But like once you start to see this, you're like, oh, crazy. That's why that image works. Oh, crazy. That's why it's easy to identify those cartoon characters. Oh, funny. Mice of Men. My God. I told you I reread Mice of Men when I was out last week. You were reading
it. Isn't it?
I just don't even know what. It is so perfectly structured. It almost makes you sick. It's somebody walks into like, I don't know, some giant basketball arena, turns around, throws a ball behind them and swooshes it. It's like what Steinbeck does. It is so precise and beautiful. I read it in middle school and I had no idea what I was looking at. I'm reading it now and it's funny. Whenever I see this stuff, if I'm with Kate or somebody, all you hear is me go, I just keep going, oh, fuck. Oh my God. I'll just put my head down. I'll be like, how did he think of that? That is so awesome.
What he does with contrast and clone characters and in that
it's
book.
Crazy.
I tell people all the time, you want to learn about story structure, just read of Mice and Men over and over again because all the lessons are in there.
I mean, just read the first 2 pages.
Yeah.
If you just read the first 2 pages and then ask yourself, could you understand the context of where they're at without him setting up the hills and stuff? What does it tell you? So like I think it's by the first page and a half, all of a sudden it says there's 2 men walking down a path. A smaller one walks in front. The larger one walks behind, even though there's space for them to walk next to each other. Like he's setting all this stuff up.
Yeah.
right? And you're sitting there going, oh my God, because it all comes back and it all pays off and yada, yada. But man, you want to talk, and that book is this
I know.
big.
Oh, it's so precise. If you know how to see how good that book is, it blows your mind.
Yes.
It blows your mind because it is such a masterclass in structure. It knows exactly what it is.
Yeah.
He does a really good job with, there's a couple of things where he uses clone characters and contrast, and there's nobody knows why. So I hope people know of Mice and Men, but the main characters really, I think, George, but the two main characters are George and Lenny, and they are sort of migrant, sort of farm workers, ranch workers during the Depression. And George is just some guy, and Lenny has diminished IQ. And what's interesting is people ask George why he's hanging out with Lenny. Like, why do you guys hang out? Right? They go everywhere together. They're like pals. Why do you guys hang out? And what's interesting is there's a scene in the bunkhouse, and there's an old man there, and he has a dog, and the dog is old, and they're complaining that the dog stinks. He's half blind, he's old, and they're like, "Why do you even have this dog?" It's like, "Curly, why do you even have this dog?" He's like, "Well, I've had him since he was a pup," and blah blah blah. It's like, he's not good to himself. He's not good for anything. Just why don't you take him out and shoot him? It's like, "Well, I couldn't do that. I've had him too long." He goes, "Well, he's just, it's not going to do it." He goes, "I'll tell you what, I'll shoot him for you. I'll shoot him for you." The guy says. He goes, I'll take it out and I'll shoot him for it. He's like, Slim's his dog's had some pups. You can have one of those pups, and they talk him into it. And so they shoot his dog. And then you get to the point in the piece where Lenny invites Curly to come with them because they're going to get a farm, their own farm. They have this dream of their own farm, and that Lenny can take care of the rabbits. That's his big thing. Like, oh, I can have rabbits and I can take care of them.
Which is set up in the first page, by the way.
Yes, it is.
First page, they set up rabbits.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I know. And the old man, at one point he just stops and he says, "You know what? I shouldn't have let them shoot my dog. I should have done that myself." Mm-hmm. What's great about that is that relationship is a clone relationship, right? Because what George and Lenny are friends. That's the value. The companionship is the value. It doesn't matter that this guy's not as intelligent or whatever. It doesn't matter. I like this guy. We are friends. That's enough. That dog is no good. No, he is. He's my companion. That's what makes him valuable.
Mm-hmm. Curly loved him. It's like,
yes,
you don't have to.
Yeah. There's a great scene where George goes off to town with all the men and Lenny is left behind, and he's wandering around, and he wanders into this back bunkhouse, and there's a guy out there by himself, and Lenny doesn't understand. It's like, "Why are you out here?" And the guy, he's a black guy, and he goes, "This is the 30s. He goes, "Why are you out here?" He goes, "Because I'm black. Like, I can't, be in the." Well, Lenny doesn't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to Lenny. He didn't understand it. And so it's a great conversation they have, because first the guy's like, "Get out of here. You're not supposed to be in here." But Lenny doesn't quite understand that. And he's like, "George says I can have rabbits and whatever." And what's great is he's just going off about rabbits, Lenny. And at one point, the black guy just invites, "Sit down. You just might as well sit down." So he sits down, and they're hanging out, and they don't have a dialogue. They have sort of monologues at each other.
Yeah.
And what the black guy says is, "You know what? It doesn't matter." Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. "It doesn't matter if we understand each other or we're talking to each other. What matters is that there's somebody here." Because he's always by himself. What matters is there's somebody here. And that whole piece is about that. The whole piece is about having that kind of companion, having somebody around that loves you and that you love. Like, that Having companionship matters. So you have the clone, you have the comparison, you have the guy who doesn't have anybody, right? George and Lenny have each other, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of that story, because Lenny accidentally kills this woman, there's a lynch mob out to get Lenny. What does George do? George doesn't let the lynch mob get him. George shoots him himself, like the old man said. It's so good.
It's hard to not get emotional just thinking about it. That's how good it is.
Yeah.
You talk about putting something in the world that will last for a very long time.
Yeah.
If you went and told Steinbeck there's no such thing as structure, what do you think he would say? You can't do that. You can't do that. What you're looking at is craft.
Yep.
What you're seeing at the highest possible level is craft. And by the way, he did it in half the amount of space that most people need to write a book.
Yep. Yeah.
It's elegance. When going back to the very beginning, right?
Yep.
Of like, when you can crystallize something and say like, contrast is how we see. You know how hard it is to do that? It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, she dunked it. She's like, all right, well, here's what you have to say. Contrast is how you see it. Now I'm going to prove it.
Yep.
And then once you start seeing it, you start going, that's what was wrong with that pitch. I didn't build enough contrast.
Yeah.
You know, when you first started working with our agency, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's what you're seeing. You was like this. It was like this. A lot of people, they cut out the first act of a pitch or something.
Right.
Right. And by doing that, you're actually cutting out the contrast.
Right.
It's a huge mistake. Like, I mean, we'll literally in a pitch, we'll sit there and go like, when we first started working together, you had this many followers and you were doing this. And you saw these kind of results and whatever. And then we made these changes, curtain, right? Like, let me show you what happened. Engagement went up, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then we've literally had conversations where people are like, well, do we really need all this stuff? Don't you feel bad to kind of set up the before and after? It's like, no, without that, they can't see the difference. Right. And so it's not just for story, it's for your presentation. Somebody out there's got to do a pitch tomorrow. Think about contrast. Somebody out there is writing a script. Think about contrast. You got to do a speech. Think about contrast.
Yep.
What was the company like before? What was it like before you went to this school versus this school? I don't know, whatever the thing is.
Yep.
Right. What was pizza like before you tasted Brian's pizza and he blew your mind? I don't know. It's like, think about contrast, because if you build that in, it will help people to see your point.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
There you go. All right. Contrast. It seems simple, but it is one of those very simple things that once you see it and start to leverage it, it will immediately help your work stand out.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks for watching You Are A Storyteller, part of the Co-Loop Podcast Network. If you have any questions, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, leave a comment below or email us at hello@beliefagency.com.